Tower of London, May 19th, 1536. Dawn breaks cold over the Thames. A woman who once wore a crown now kneels on a scaffold, her neck exposed to a French blade sharper than any English axe. 3 years ago, she was the most desired woman in England. Today, she'll be the most hated corpse. But here's what makes your blood freeze. She's probably innocent. And the man who ordered her death? The same man who once moved heaven and earth to make her his queen? Her name was Anne Boleyn, and her story proves that love, when twisted by power and desperation, becomes the most lethal force in history. How does a passionate romance that defied an entire religion end with a beheading? How does a king's obsession transform into murderous rage in just 1,000 days? And what happens when an entire kingdom watches a queen accused of sleeping with 5 men, including her own brother, knowing full well she's probably being framed? The answer lies not in Anne's guilt, but in something far more disturbing: a king's terror of appearing weak. Rewind to 1533. Anne Boleyn emerges from the Tower of London, but this time as a queen, not a condemned prisoner. Thousands cheer. Henry VIII has just torn England from the Roman Catholic Church, created his own religion, and made himself supreme head of the Church of England. All for this woman, all because he believed she'd give him what Catherine of Aragon couldn't: a living son. The pressure on Anne's womb wasn't just personal. It was political, theological, a matter of national survival. Henry had already proven himself capable of discarding a loyal wife of 20 years. Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Spanish royalty, had given him years of devotion and one surviving daughter, Mary. Not enough. Henry declared their marriage invalid, humiliated her publicly, and exiled her from court. Catherine died alone in January 1536, denied even a proper funeral. If he could do that to a princess, what chance did Anne have if she failed? And fail she did, at least in the only measure that mattered to Tudor England. Anne gave birth to a girl, Elizabeth, a name that would later become legendary, but in 1533, she was just another daughter in a world that demanded sons. The disappointment crushed Henry. His entire justification for breaking with Rome, for risking war with Catholic Europe, for making enemies of half his kingdom, rested on Anne producing a male heir. Now picture the psychological weight on Anne. Every month that passed without pregnancy was a month closer to disaster. Every miscarriage was a potential death sentence. And there were signs of desperation. Less than a year after Elizabeth's birth, rumors spread that Anne was of a goodly belly again. But mysteriously, no birth was recorded, no miscarriage documented. Medical historians now believe Anne suffered a phantom pregnancy, her body manifesting every symptom of pregnancy because her mind couldn't accept any other reality. Think about that level of psychological torture. Your entire existence depends on your reproductive system performing on command, and your body betrays you with false hope. Meanwhile, Henry was creating enemies faster than Anne could conceive children. His break from Rome required absolute loyalty, enforced through a new weapon: the Act of Succession. Every English subject had to swear an oath recognizing Anne as the true queen and any children as legitimate heirs. Refuse, and you were a traitor. The penalty? A death so brutal it makes modern execution methods look merciful. Prior John Howden and 9 of his monks refused to swear. They were dragged to execution in their habits, hanged until nearly dead, then cut down while still conscious. What happened next reveals the calculated cruelty of Tudor justice. They were disemboweled while alive, their intestines and hearts burned before their eyes, then beheaded and quartered. Foreign ambassadors reported that executioners rubbed the bloody organs on the dying men's faces. This wasn't justice, this was terrorism. And every gruesome detail served a purpose: make the cost of defying Henry so horrific that no one would dare. But here's the twisted irony. Every execution made Henry and Anne's need for a son more desperate. They needed to justify this bloodshed with a thriving dynasty. Instead, Anne's womb remained stubbornly empty of sons. For 2 years, despite the pressure, Henry and Anne seemed genuinely in love. Courtiers described them as merry together, laughing, hunting, enjoying each other's company. They stayed at Thornbury Castle in summer 1535, 10 days of apparent marital bliss. But Tudor happiness was always conditional, always fragile, always one disappointment away from destruction. Their relationship existed in cycles, passionate reunions followed by vicious arguments, sunshine and storms, as contemporaries described it. The pattern itself reveals the impossible tension they lived under. Then January 1536 arrived, bringing two catastrophic events within weeks of each other. First, Catherine of Aragon died on January 7th. Henry celebrated. He dressed in yellow, threw parties, and jousted in tournaments. With Catherine gone, no one could dispute Anne's legitimacy anymore. Their son, when he came, would be unquestionably legitimate. The path seemed clear. But 10 days later, everything shattered. Henry VIII, still athletic, but aging, still desperate to prove his masculine prowess on the jousting field, suffered a catastrophic accident. His horse fell on him. The king lay unconscious for over 2 hours, a severe head injury that may have fundamentally altered his personality. Modern neurologists examining historical records believe Henry likely suffered frontal lobe damage. This part of the brain controls personality, behavior, impulse control. Damage here doesn't just change moods. It can transform a person entirely, exaggerating existing traits or creating completely new behavioral patterns. The charming young king became increasingly paranoid, cruel, unpredictable, and his injured leg, an old ulcer reopened by the fall, would never heal. Physicians burned it with hot irons, trying to drain infection. Imagine the constant pain, the frustration, the rage of a king who once defined himself through physical prowess, now crippled and suffering. But the immediate consequence was even worse. When news of Henry's accident reached Anne, she was pregnant, 4 months along, old enough to confirm what the child would be. The shock, the fear that her husband might die, the terror of what would happen to her without Henry's protection triggered something catastrophic. Anne miscarried, and the fetus was male. Henry's long-awaited son, lost. Some reports claim Henry directly blamed Anne, though she insisted the shock of his accident caused it. Either way, the damage was irreversible. Henry's reported words cut like a blade. "I see that God will not give me male children." The same divine disapproval he'd claimed for his marriage to Catherine now seemed to curse his marriage to Anne. And unlike Catherine, Anne had no powerful family to protect her, no Spanish Empire ready to go to war on her behalf. She was vulnerable, expendable, and Henry, whether he admitted it or not, was already looking elsewhere. Enter Jane Seymour. Pale, submissive, everything Anne wasn't. Where Anne was witty and sharp-tongued, Jane was quiet and obedient. Where Anne challenged Henry, Jane deferred. The Spanish ambassador, Eustace Chapuis, a man who loathed Anne and called her the concubine, gleefully reported rumors. Henry was courting another lady. He'd sent Jane a letter with a purse full of gold coins. Jane's response was calculated brilliance. She returned both unopened, saying she was from good family and would only accept gifts when God gave her an advantageous marriage. Playing hard to get, or genuine virtue? Either way, it worked. But here's what most people misunderstand. Henry wasn't planning to marry Jane. Not yet. Kings had mistresses. It was expected. Accepted. There's no evidence Henry intended to abandon Anne, until the rumors started. Whispers that Anne had been unfaithful, multiple partners, close to the king. Some say court factions orchestrated her downfall. Others blame Henry's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, though evidence is murky. What matters is this. Once accusations of adultery surfaced, Henry's masculine honor was at stake, and for a Tudor king obsessed with appearing virile, powerful, in control, the suggestion that his wife was sleeping with other men was intolerable. Worse than treason, it was humiliation. It meant other men had possessed what was his. It meant he couldn't control his own household, his own wife, his own bed. The allegations spread like plague. Henry Norris, gentleman of the Privy Chamber and Henry's closest friend, Mark Smeaton, a court musician, William Brereton, Francis Weston, and most shocking, George Boleyn, Anne's own brother. 5 men accused of adultery with the Queen, one of them, her sibling, making it incest as well. The charges were almost certainly fabricated, but in Tudor England, accusation was nearly indistinguishable from guilt, especially when the king wanted to believe them. And Henry did believe, or convinced himself he did, because believing Anne guilty was easier than admitting he'd destroyed his kingdom for a woman who couldn't give him a son. May Day, 1536. Henry and Anne attended a tournament at Greenwich Palace, a celebration, courtly entertainment, the kind of event they'd enjoyed dozens of times.